Welcome to part 3 of my Security Plus 7-1 practice exam series. In this video, I answered 20 realistic Security Plus practice exam questions in real time. Now, these questions are not from the actual exam. They are questions that are formatted in a very similar way to what you should expect on the actual exam. And the purpose of this video is to see my thought process in real time when answering these questions, as I believe that is helpful for anyone trying to pass this exam. All right, enough talking. Let's jump right into it. All right, and before we start, just going to give you a heads up that I will have timestamps in the description below for your convenience, so you can go ahead and skip around if you want to. But let's go ahead and jump into question 1. Question 1. A company's e-commerce website application is experiencing a surge in online transactions. To protect against cyber attacks, which security solution should be implemented to inspect web traffic and block malicious requests? A. UTM, B. Next Generation Firewall, C. Web Application Firewall, or D. Layer 7 Firewall. Okay, so let's take a look here. The key to this one is where in the scenario it says website application, so web app, and that right there gives me the answer. The best answer is going to be C. Web Application Firewall. Now, this is a firewall that is specifically made for web applications running on port 80 or 443, which is HTTP or HTTPS. The other options are good options and definitely help, but a WAF, so Web Application Firewall, is specifically used for web applications. And according to CompTIA, this will be the best answer, so I'm going to go with C. WAF, so Web Application Firewall, is specifically designed to protect web applications from common web-based attacks like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, and cross-site request forgery. It inspects web traffic, identifies malicious requests, and blocks them before they can reach the application. Question 2. A tech company stores confidential press releases on its internal website for review before public release. One day, a sensitive announcement about a major product launch was leaked to the media prematurely, causing significant stock market fluctuations. Which type of application attack is most likely responsible for this breach? A. Cross-site scripting, B. SQL injection, C. Directory traversal, or D. Privilege escalation. Okay, which type of application attack is most likely responsible for this breach? So I would say it's a bit of a straightforward one. And it's definitely a question that requires you to know the differences between the different types of attacks here. So let's take a look. I would say the key here would be sensitive announcement about a major product launch was leaked to the media prematurely. That means that the announcement was already made, right? And given the possible answers, the answer that makes the most sense here would be directory traversal. And that's where you are able to navigate through the directory that the website or website files or web application is hosted on, which obviously is not intended to be viewed. So that's where I would say the announcement was prior to going live. So out of all of these, I would say directory traversal is the best one that best aligns with the scenario. So I'm going to go with C. Directory traversal is the most likely explanation for the leak of the unauthorized press release, as it aligns with the scenario of accessing files outside of the intended scope. Question 3. An organization is looking to implement a security control that can dynamically adapt access decisions based on real-time risk assessments and user behavior analytics. Which of the following controls would best suit this requirement? A. ABAC, B. MAC, C. RBAC, or D. DAC. All right, so different types of access controls. So this one is asking for the control that would, adapt access based on real-time assessments, and that's key to understanding that. And this would mean access can change dynamically and assesses whether access is granted or not in real time. Out of all four of these, the best answer is going to be attribute-based access control. And, an example of that would be something like a file not being accessed after like 5 p.m. If it's after 5 p.m., which would be considered outside normal hours, access is denied. But let's go ahead and go through them just to help out here. So MAC, so mandatory access control, would be something like a clearance level, such as secret, top secret, etc. And then RBAC, so role-based access control, which I would say is the most popular. And that would be things like, finance department, their role would only be able to access finance files. It's like a role-based. So, and then DAC, that's going to be, granular access. But that would be like a Google Doc where the owner can determine who would have access to that, if that makes sense. So going with ABAC. ABAC evaluates attributes of users, objects, and the environment to make access decisions. This flexibility allows for dynamic, context-aware access control that can adapt to changing risk levels and user behavior. Question 4. A company is developing a new web application and wants to ensure that it is resistant to common web-based attacks. Which of the following security measures should be implemented during the development process to mitigate the risk of injected attacks? A. Input validation. B. Code signing. C. Firewall. Or D. Encryption. All right, so the key here is web application, and the solution will help mitigate injection type attacks on the new web application. So you have to ask yourself, what are injection attacks? And that's going to be something like a SQL injection or cross-site scripting attack. And in order for those to be successful, the attacker needs to, let's say, input something, like malicious data or scripts or commands, things like that. So now you got to ask yourself, how would you prevent a web application from accepting malicious input data? And the best answer would be adding input validation to the web application. The other options are good options, but they don't directly mitigate an injection attack. So going with A, input validation. Input validation is the most effective way to mitigate injection attacks because it checks and sanitizes user input before it is processed by an application, preventing malicious code from being executed. Question 5. A security analyst is investigating a series of failed login attempts on a cloud-based application. The logs show repeated attempts from a single IP address using a variety of usernames and passwords. Which of the following attack types is most likely occurring? A. Password spraying. B. Dictionary attack. C. Brute force attack. Or D. Rainbow table attack. All right, I like this question. It's a good example of a type of question that you could absolutely see on your exam. And all four of these possible answers are different types of password attacks. So right away, I'm going to go with option A, password spraying. But let's go ahead and go through the others to kind of explain why. So dictionary attack, that's going to be an attack that uses a list of common passwords. But the scenario mentions both passwords and usernames. So that's key to this one here. And brute force, that's going to be an attack that would use like all combinations of characters to guess the password, but doesn't usually use username. So an example would be like 001, 002, 003, and it keeps going up to try every combination of passwords possible to break something. And then rainbow table attack. Now that's going to use like a table of password hashes, and it's usually done offline. But right away ruling that one off because this also mentions usernames, and that's very uncommon. So password spraying is going to be the best option, and that's going to be where passwords, usually common passwords, are combined with common usernames to see if there's a match. So going with A. Password spraying is a technique where an attacker tries a common password against many different user accounts. This matches the observed behavior of repeated attempts from a single IP address using various usernames. Question 6. A security analyst is investigating a series of seemingly unrelated security incidents across different departments within the organization. The incidents include unauthorized access to financial records, theft of confidential research data, and exfiltration of sensitive customer information. Which of the following is most likely responsible for these coordinated attacks? A. CompTIA, B. Hacktivist, C. Insider threat, or D. APT, which is advanced persistent threat. Okay, so a few things to point out here. The first being that the scenario mentions security incidents across different departments that seem unrelated. And with the different attacks in the scenario, it's safe to say it was for financial gain based on what was compromised, which is important to understand when answering this question correctly, in my opinion. So right away, I can rule out insider threat and hacktivists. Insider threat because the attacks between the departments don't seem related, and hacktivists because the attacks seem to be for a profit, such as theft or confidential research data, exfiltration of customer data, stuff like that. And then that leaves us with CompTIA and APT, and definitely ruling out CompTIA, as all of these attacks are very advanced. So going with D, advanced persistent threat. APTs are highly skilled and well-funded threat actors, often state-sponsored, who conduct long-term targeted attacks. Their ability to infiltrate multiple systems and remain undetected for extended periods of time makes them the most likely culprit in this scenario. Question 7. A security analyst is configuring a new firewall and wants to ensure that only necessary traffic is allowed to pass through. Which of the following default firewall policies would be the most secure? A. Implicit allow, B. Implicit deny, C. Block all traffic, or D. Allow all traffic. All right, so we're trying to figure out the solution that would by default block all traffic, but would then allow you to allow certain traffic. The best option would be B, implicit deny, and that would make it so by default all traffic is blocked, but allow for a system or a network administrator, right, to allow certain traffic to flow through. And in the IT world, implicit deny, that acts as like a catch-all safety net and is usually an option that's set up as a default for most firewall configurations out of the box. But going with B, implicit deny. An implicit deny policy is the most secure default policy for a firewall. It blocks all traffic by default, and only traffic that is explicitly allowed by a rule is permitted to pass through. This ensures that only necessary traffic is allowed, reducing the risk of unauthorized access or attacks. Question 8. A security analyst is reviewing a company's security architecture and wants to implement a solution that will help detect and prevent unauthorized access to sensitive data. Which of the following would be the most effective solution? A, DLP, B, IDS, C, WAF, WAF, D, VPN. Okay, detect and prevent unauthorized access to sensitive data. So, sensitive data, I would say, is the key here, but also detect and prevent. Prevent is also a key here. Out of all the solutions here, I would say only one of them would do both of those things when it comes to data, and that would be DLP, which is data loss prevention. IDS, so intrusion detection system, would not prevent unauthorized access to data. That would be an IPS. And then WAF, web application firewall, that's mostly going to protect web applications from malicious attack and traffic, but does not usually prevent unauthorized access to sensitive data. And then VPN, virtual private network, that's going to secure communication in transit, but doesn't directly control access or detect unauthorized access to sensitive data. So going with A on this one. DLP is specifically designed to detect and prevent unauthorized access, use, or transmission of sensitive data. It can monitor data in use, in motion, and at rest, making it the most effective solution for protecting sensitive data. Question 9. A security analyst is configuring a system to require users to authenticate with a password in a one-time code generated by a mobile app. Which of the following authentication factors are being used? A, something you know and something you have. B, something you have and something you are. C, something you know and somewhere you are. Or D, something you are and somewhere you are. So let's go ahead and reread this. A security analyst is configuring a system to require users to authenticate with a password and a one-time code generated by a mobile app. All right. So a password, that would be something you know. You know a password. And then a one-time code, that is something that you have. You know, you generate or get sent a one-time code, and having it in your possession is something you have. So going with A, something you know and something you have. In this scenario, the password represents something you know, and the one-time code generated by the mobile app represents something you have. Question 10. A security analyst is investigating a series of unauthorized login attempts on a company's network. The logs show that the attacker is attempting to guess many passwords for multiple user accounts. Which of the following account management practices would be most effective in mitigating this type of attack? A, implementing password complexity requirements. B, enabling account lockout after a certain number of failed attempts. C, enforcing regular password changes. Or D, using a centralized authentication system. Okay, let me take a quick look at the question again. Security analyst is investigating a series of unauthorized login attempts on a company's network. The logs show that the attacker is attempting to guess many passwords for multiple user accounts. Which of the following account management practices would be most effective in mitigating this type of attack? Oh, this is kind of I would say this one's kind of a hard one here. So I would say the key here is attempting to guess many passwords here. And I would also say that the solution to this problem would be a way to prevent a lot of password guesses. And the best way to prevent many guesses would be to implement some kind of, account lockout. The only reason why I'm not going with A, while it's a good answer, is because a strong password doesn't prevent the attacker from making repeated attempts. So I'm going to go with B on this one. It makes the most sense to me. I might get this one wrong. It's kind of a tricky question because it says multiple user accounts, but I'm going to go with B. Okay. Enabling account lockout after a certain number of failed attempts is the most effective way to mitigate password guessing attacks. It temporarily disables the account after a set number of incorrect attempts, preventing the attacker from continuing their attempts. Question 11. A security analyst is investigating a series of unauthorized money transfers within a financial institution's internal network. The transactions bypass traditional security controls and appear to originate from compromised employee workstations. Which of the following attack techniques is the most likely cause? A. ARP spoofing, B. DNS cache poisoning, or C. LOTL, which is living off the land, or D. VLAN hopping. Okay, let me take a look one more time. These questions are tricking me. Okay, so I would say it's a bit of a tough one, but a few things I want to point out here. So what's happening? Unauthorized money transfers, that happened within the internal network, and the transactions bypass traditional security controls and appear to originate from employee workstations. So I would say that the answer that makes the most sense to me would be C, LOTL, which is living off the land. And that's going to involve attackers using like legitimate tools and resources that are already present on a victim's system or company's controls to carry out attacks. Compromised workstations, legitimate tools, and bypassing security controls. Those are all like symptoms of living off the land. So I'm going to go with C. I might be wrong on this one, but I'm going to go with C on this. Living off the land is a technique where attackers use legitimate tools and resources already present on a compromised system to carry out their malicious activities. Question 12. A large retail company plans to outsource its payment processing to a third-party vendor. To ensure the vendor's commitment to data security, what should the company require before entering into an agreement? A. Independent assessment. B. Penetration testing. C. Parallel processing. Or D. Mandatory access control. All right, so the question is pretty much asking which of the following is a way to verify the vendor's commitment to data security. And right away, the best answer is going to be A, independent assessment. But we can go ahead and look at the other ones. For B, penetration testing, it's a valuable component, but it's not sufficient on its own. For C, parallel processing, that's just processing multiple tasks at the same time. But so that one doesn't really make sense. And then for D, mandatory access control, also known as MAC, that is an access control that restricts access to resources based on predefined rules. So going with A, independent assessment. An independent assessment provides a comprehensive evaluation of the vendor's security practices, including their compliance with industry standards like PCI DSS. This can give the retail company confidence that their sensitive payment data will be handled securely. Question 13. A company is considering migrating its sensitive data and applications to a cloud service provider. Which of the following cloud architecture models would offer the greatest degree of control and customization over the security configurations? We have A, SaaS, B, PaaS, C, IaaS, or D, MAAS. All right, so the different as-a-service solutions here. So the question is asking which one of these would allow the most control and customization, essentially, right? And if you know the differences between the different as a services, it's a pretty easy question. The best answer is going to be C, and that is infrastructure as a service. And that's pretty much bare bones, where you're able to configure your apps, operating system, data, the way that you want it or the way you need it to meet your business needs. The other ones have less control and are more vendor dependent than infrastructure as a service. And D, monitoring as a service doesn't fit here at all. So going with C. Infrastructure as a service provides the customer with the most control over security configurations. The customer is responsible for managing the operating systems, applications, and data, allowing them to implement security measures tailored to their specific needs. Question 14. A security analyst is reviewing a company's network logs and notices a large amount of traffic from multiple IP addresses directed at a single port on a server. The traffic is causing the server to become unresponsive. Which of the following mitigation techniques would be most effective in this scenario? A, patching the server software. B, implementing an IPS. C, blocking the source IP address at the firewall. Or D, rate limiting traffic to the affected port. All right. So we know that only one port is being affected by this huge increase in traffic. Right away, I'm going to rule out A and rule out C. For A, we don't know if there's even a patch available. If there was, we don't know if the patch would fix this particular problem. And then for C, blocking the source IP addresses at the firewall. It says multiple IP addresses, and now it might not be feasible to block all of these. It could be hundreds of different IPs, and they could change as well if you block them. But also, there's no indication that this is actually malicious. Let me just double check that. Yeah, it doesn't say that it's necessarily malicious. So it could be like a misconfiguration somewhere causing the traffic from legitimate sources. So you don't want to block that if that is the case. But for this reason, I am also ruling out B. And I would say that the best answer is going to be D, rate limiting. And that will limit the amount of traffic that can come through at any given time. So going with D. Rate limiting traffic to the affected port is the most effective mitigation technique in this scenario. It can help to reduce the impacts of the attack by limiting the amount of traffic that can reach the server, allowing it to remain responsive to legitimate requests. Question 15. A security analyst is reviewing a company's network infrastructure and wants to implement a solution that will help detect and prevent unauthorized access attempts from external sources. Which of the following would be the most effective solution? A, honeypot, B, honeynet, C, firewall, or D, network segmentation. All right, so key for this one is detect and prevent unauthorized access attempts from external sources. At the end of the day, given the scenario in the question, only one of these options can technically do that, and that would be firewall. It's not the best answer, but that is the best answer given the options here. But let's go ahead and go through each one. Honeypot is a system designed to look like a legitimate target for attackers, and its purpose is to lure attackers into a controlled environment. And then when that happens, you can see that you can study their behaviors, and see what their attack methods were. And then a honeynet is just a bunch of honeypots, essentially. And then network segmentation wouldn't detect unauthorized access attempts from external sources. It just segments it. So I'm going to go with C, firewall. A firewall is a network security device that monitors and controls incoming and outgoing network traffic based on predetermined security rules. It can be configured to block unauthorized access attempts from external sources, making it the most effective solution in this scenario. Question 16. A security analyst is reviewing a company's security policies and notices that there is no guidance on how to handle data stored on employees' personal devices that are used for work purposes. Which of the following policies would be updated to address this issue? We have A, AUP, B, EULA, C, data retention policy, and then D, remote access policy. Okay, so the question is asking what policy out of these four is used to handle how the data is used and stored on devices. That's key. So which policy would directly govern that? I would say that the best option is going to be A, AUP, which is acceptable use policy. So B, EULA, that is like a legal agreement between a software provider and a user. So like if you download a game, a video game, something like that, you're going to sign the EULA and you're going to agree to the terms of that. Data retention policy, that's going to focus on how data should be kept, not how it's handled on personal devices. And then remote access policy deals with secure access to the company network from outside. So not necessarily the use of personal devices for work. Not the best scenario, but out of all four of these, I would say that A, acceptable use policy, would be the best one here. AUP defines the acceptable use of company resources, including personal devices used for work. It would be the most appropriate policy to update to include guidelines on handling data stored on personal devices. Question 17. A security analyst is tasked with choosing a cryptographic solution to protect highly sensitive data at rest efficiently. Which of the following would be the most appropriate choice? A, SHA-256, B, RSA, C, MD5, or D, AES-256. All right, so it's asking which cryptography method would protect data at rest, which means encryption, and that is key. And it also says efficiently, which is another key. So for SHA-256, that's going to be a hashing algorithm. So that's going to more so focus on integrity and not encryption. B, RSA, that can encrypt. It's more used for key exchange in digital signatures, and there is a better answer. MD5, that's going to be insecure, very insecure. And it's also a hashing algorithm, so ruling that one out. And then you have D, AES-256, which is the industry standard currently for encryption, and it is very efficient. So going with D, AES-256. AES-256 is a symmetric encryption algorithm widely recognized as a strong choice for encrypting data at rest due to its security and performance characteristics. Question 18. A healthcare organization experiences a data breach due to inadequate security practices exposing patients' PHI. Which of the following is the most likely consequence the organization will face? A, potential sentencing for the CISO. B, revoking of the organization's business license. C, hefty fines and potential lawsuits. Or D, temporary shutdown of all operations. All right, let's take a look here. And if you're unsure, PHI means personal health information. It's similar to PII, but This one's more healthcare related. So let's take a look here. For A, in very rare cases, senior leadership may receive sentences, but this would be for severe negligence and it is very unlikely, unfortunately. For B, revoking a license is extremely unlikely as well, unless there's repeat offenses, but it doesn't necessarily talk about any licenses here, so ruling B out. Let's take a look at D, temporary shutdown of all operations. This is extremely rare as well, and this only necessarily happens when there's a risk to public safety. So ruling out D, as it doesn't talk about that. But then you have C, hefty fines and potential lawsuits, which if you watch the news, you can see all these data breaches, whether it's PII, PHI, anything like that. They usually only pay peanuts for what has actually been breached. And that's why I said unfortunately for answer A. But going with C, hefty fines and potential lawsuits. Hefty fines and potential lawsuits are the most likely consequences of a healthcare data breach involving PHI. Regulatory bodies like HIPAA impose significant fines for non-compliance, and affected individuals may file lawsuits for damages. Question 19. A company is conducting a business impact analysis for a critical system. They determine that the maximum tolerable downtime for this system is 4 hours. Which of the following metrics best represents this finding? A, RPO, B, MTBF, C, MTTR, or D, RTO? All right, so the question is asking which of these business impact analysis it addresses the maximum tolerable downtime for a system. The options are A, recovery point objective, B, mean time before failure, C, mean time to repair, and then D, recovery time objective. So RPO defines the maximum acceptable amount of data loss in a case of disruption. MTBF measures the average time between system failures. MTTR measures average time it takes to repair like a failed system or a piece of equipment. And then RTO is the maximum amount of time a system can be down before it causes significant harm to the business, which directly addresses the scenario in the question. So going with D, RTO. RTO is the maximum acceptable time a system can be down after a disruption before causing significant business impact. It's exactly what I just said. In this scenario, the 4-hour maximum tolerable downtime directly corresponds to the RTO. Question 20. A security analyst is reviewing firewall logs and observes a large number of inbound connections from a single IP address to various ports on the company's web server. The connections are being made in rapid succession, and many of them are being rejected. Which of the following is the most likely explanation for this activity? We have A, port scanning, B, SQL injection, C, cross-site scripting, or D, DDoS attack. Let me go ahead and just take a look one more time at the question. It's reviewing firewall logs and observes a large number of inbound connections from a single IP address to various ports on the company's web server. Okay, perfect. All right. So something I want to point out here is it mentions that a single IP address to various ports on a web server. Single IP and various ports are key to this scenario here. So let me ask you, out of all the possible answers, which one of these types of attacks or methods here would result in a single IP address to multiple ports? It's not going to be SQL injection or cross-site scripting, and it's not a DDoS attack. DDoS attack would be multiple IP addresses to a single port usually. And the best answer here is going to be port scanning. And this is going to be utilizing, a tool like Nmap to perform reconnaissance on a web server to learn more about it and to see what types of ports are open or closed. So going with A, port scanning. Port scanning is a technique used to identify open ports on a target system. This is done by sending connection requests to various ports and observing their responses. The observed behavior of rapid connection attempts to multiple ports from a single IP address is characteristics of port scanning activity. All right, that wraps up part 3 of the Security Plus 701 practice exam series. If you've gotten this far, thank you for watching. And if you don't want to miss part 4, be sure to subscribe. It's coming very soon. But yeah, let me know how your studying journey is going and when you plan on taking your exam. But for now, thanks again and take care.